I'll call the June 15th Study Commission meeting to order. If we can, I have Lori Casey, Cindy Perdue-Dolan is excused, I have Ben Thielen, Matt Steppen is excused, I'm present, Dan Dennehy, Chad Silk, Cindy Shaw, and Mary McCormick. So if we could have our Pledge of Allegiance and prayer. All right, so we have no public in the room tonight, so no public comment on items on the agenda or not on the agenda, but within the jurisdiction of the Study Commission. We have two sets of meeting minutes to approve, June 1st and June 8th. Ms. McCormick?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know. I just read the minutes for May 1st. I wasn't at the meeting last week, or June 1st. And it said that I volunteered to help with the final report, and I didn't. I volunteered to help with educational materials.
Correct. I recall that as well. We can ask for an amendment to that section in June 1st notes. Any other changes needed? Ms. Shaw?
Thank you, Madam Chair. With seeing none, I would say I'd like to approve the minutes of the meetings that were held on June 1st and June 8th as amended.
Okay, I have a motion from Shaw and a second from Dennehy. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Thank you for approving the notes, folks. Correspondence and or study commission update. I have received no correspondence as of today. Has anybody else? All right, so moving on to our unfinished business. Review and approve charter changes is in the first section here. And we had last week gone through the fire services section if option 2 were to be voted upon by the public, and then we kicked that back to County Attorney Enruth. And so I'd like to walk through that and get our affirmation that that is the language we'd like to proceed with. So let's go ahead and, does everybody have access to that electronic document I sent out, or do we need to get some copies? We're good? Okay. So County Attorney Enruth, you reviewed what we had proposed.
Chairwoman Brandel, Council, yes, I reviewed your proposed changes. I understand where they're coming from. I do believe the other ones were older. However, Commissioner Silk's additional email after that I do believe is appropriate to add back in the one sentence of either chief executive or mayor duties and council duties. That way there's no fight over who does what.
So I think it was section C that we're referring to here, folks, where it said, except as otherwise provided by this charter or until changed by ordinance, the organization, qualifications, and appointment of officers and members of the paid fire department shall be governed by the provisions of the Montana Municipal Fire Department law, except that the chief executive or city manager in this case shall have the powers and duties of a mayor, and the council of commissioners shall have the power and duties of a city council as provided in said state law. And then in the existing language we had, and the fire commission shall have those powers and duties set forth here in subsection 7.03. And I think, Mr. Silk, can you kind of enlighten us into the changes that you're recommending there?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. The and I'm looking for it right now, where it talks about the Director of Fire Services and the Council of Commissioners having the basically full authority for the fire service itself. And excuse me, I'm looking for it right now.
I'm looking at the amended draft language that I had sent out via email. And it's on the first page. It's section 7.03, and then we're on section C. County Attorney Enworth had sent us back the redlined language from the charter, and it's a separate document in email.
But you'll want to look at the one that you did, Chairwoman Brandel. That's, so yours has got the red lines and the blue lines in it.
Yeah, so there's 2 sets of edits. Looks like we need a copy to be made. Let me see if we've got somebody downstairs. Hold on.
So I can go to my office.
I just have the final report.
Okay. Mr. Enworth, could you get us
Yes.
a few copies? Thank you.
Madam Chair.
I don't have
Mr. Silk?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And while County Attorney Enworth is grabbing that, the reason for it was just to make it clear that within the executive branch of government, as our charter lists the departments under the chief executive or the city manager, that it is still very clear that the whatever executive branch is mentioned in the charter, if the Council of Commissioners are mentioned in the charter too, just for that delineation and not the blending of the branches of government, is mainly what it was about. And it was just an addition to, it wasn't taking out anything, and I'm going to continue to look for it.
Ms. Adams, did you have copies of giving folks? Because I just set Mr. Enworth on a hunt for some.
Sorry, Madam Chair, copies of what?
Never mind. The document that we're reviewing right now. The redlined charter changes from last week that we also updated last week.
I do not.
Okay.
Those were copies that Cindy had requested of the final report.
Oh, perfect.
That's redlined,
Perfect.
and the fire department stuff, so I don't have the redline charter.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Sill?
Thank you. I believe that I found it. In section E, it states the administration, operational control, budgetary authority, and coordination of all fire protection services, including volunteer and rural fire departments, shall be exercised through the Butte-Silver Fire Department under the authority of the Director of Fire Services and the Council of Commissioners. I believe it's appropriate that we mimic what is in section C, where it states that except that the chief executive or city manager shall have the powers and duties of mayor, and the Council of Commissioners shall have the powers and duties of the city council as provided in state law. And the reason I say that is because in section E, I would hope that it doesn't get confused later on that the executive side of our branch of government isn't included in section E. I feel it's important to have both branches named with the definition provided above in section C.
Okay, so once Mr. Enworth gets back with the copies, this will make a little bit more sense for those of you that are struggling to follow. So you would add the language from above, just mimic that below.
Correct.
Okay.
And one of the, another reason is in the original Section D in our old, or the original charter, it mentions the chief executive having the powers of mayor and the council of commissioners having the powers of city council. And I believe that it's, again, appropriate to have those two different branches of governments mentioned in the charter for a clear structure of how the fire department will be run. My fear is that I don't want to create any ambiguity going forward when there's been a history of such for decades. And I don't know if it would, but I imagine when they voted in the original charter and in 1996, they never thought there would be ambiguity as well. So that's what I'm just trying to make sure of.
I'm wondering with this language too, if in C you could just summarize, because you know, if we repeat that sentence from up above, we're repeating the sentence from up above. So maybe we can say under the authority of the Director of Fire Services, comma, the Chief Executive or City Manager, comma, and the Council of Commissioners, because we refer to the definitions of their powers and duties above. Ms. McCormick?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Please excuse me for having some confusion. Is this section dealing with option 2? So we have changed it from what we originally voted on, where the volunteers would submit their budgets for council approval?
We had a lengthy discussion with Mr. Enruth last week regarding the needed changes as he saw it. And so this is what the group worked on last week to try to redraft and kind of get closer to each other's language in the charter, and then it's to be voted on tonight.
So was it, I'm sorry, I've been gone and I didn't have a chance to, I usually watch the meetings that I miss, and so I'm behind the 8 ball, and that's kind of, I mean, to me, that was a very important thing, that we allow the volunteer departments to put together budgets, for those budgets to be seen, for those budgets to be included and considered, and, you know, not, I mean, to me, this reads like we're vesting all budget authority into the Director of Fire Services for creating the budget for the fire department. And that's quite a deviation from what we originally voted on. And maybe you talked about it last week, but I guess, I'm sorry to have to be caught up on this, but I would like to know, I guess, from Mr. Enruth, why he thinks that change has to be made. So.
Mr. Silk?
Thank you, Madam Chair. One of the reasons that was brought up at the last meeting was it's already through ordinance, that avenue, to have volunteer departments create an annual budget and to be submitted to the Director of Fire Services. I believe that having anything mentioned about the budget in the charter is somewhat inappropriate as things move forward. There are conversations that the fire coordinator in the future could be the one to set the annual budgets. And it's so, as far as being specific or too specific in the process or in the charter, it might make more sense to leave the ordinance in place, because there's already a law in Butte-Silver to make that happen. Just because it's in the charter doesn't mean that it's going to happen more. And I don't want to, you know, there was an avenue for that to happen this year, and there was not as much participation as maybe what everyone would have liked to have. Another reason is just from a pure budgetary standpoint, that if each department has their own budget, an example was brought up that if a department needed a new roof, but that roof came in under budget and another department needed some PPE equipment, that money could not easily be transferred from one department to another, as opposed to having everything in one budget, which it's been in the last 30 years, where you could just have a line item transfer.
Ms. McCormick, the general discussion last week was regarding empowering ordinance and empowering the Council of Commissioners and those, if this were adopted, those involved to be writing those ordinances in order to be nimble. So this commission struck out a lot of language that was specifying different things. For instance, we said, in the first section regarding what the power and duty of testing applicants, et cetera, we struck that, saying that was a suggestion from us to eliminate those specific duties, deferring that to ordinance, and then the group could include the volunteer coordinator, and the duties might be more expansive than just the items listed in there. So we wanted to make sure that there was room to be nimble. And then same thing further down, we removed a lot of language, or recommended removing a lot of language regarding an advisory committee, and who is on that to, again, allow there to be nimble organization through ordinance. Mr. Thielen.
Madam Chair, thank you. So looking at this and listening to Commissioner Silk, at one point I thought we discussed eliminating that terminology, the Director of Fire Services, and all of a sudden now it's back in here. So I'd like to know why.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Enriff, for bringing these up. So now everybody has the paper copy. This is the existing charter language, redlined from Mr. Enruth, and then further added with blue lines into the sections that this group worked on last week and were recommending.
Reversed.
Reversed.
You're the blue, I'm the blue, you're the red.
Okay. I'm red, he's blue.
Yep.
So we're red, I guess, because we
Yes,
made those
council's red.
recommendations. Mr. Thielen, I don't recall the Director of Fire Services conversation. I don't remember that title question. Can you kind of enlighten me with that one?
Yes, ma'am. It's just that having the chief have that title also is, to me, it clouds the issue, and it does for a lot of other people. The chief is the chief. To give him another title, it's just kind of polluting the waters, as it were. And I would think that the Director of Fire Services, if they're going to do that, should be a separate entity entirely and not the same person.
I see. Okay, I thank you for reminding me. I recall this conversation now, too. We were talking about that title being specified in this charter. And I guess it's open for a conversation because I don't know that we came to a consensus, if I recall.
Well, with that, I still think Chief Osborne does a good job, and I just don't think saddling him with two titles is going to help anything. I think all that, and it creates a lot of animosity between the volunteers and Chief Osborne, because they have to then, go to him, which they're going to have to anyway, even if he's the chief. I mean, as the chief instead of as the Director of Fire Services. I still think the Director of Fire Services should be a separate entity all its own.
And we had the volunteer coordinator in here. Mr. Dennehy?
Madam Chair, members of the commission, and Ben, I think when we were having that discussion, we were very strong on the point that having fire chief and Director of Fire Services does provide a kind of a dual sort of responsibility, and that's why when you brought up the idea of having a volunteer fire coordinator, I think that was your idea. That was it was more like, I won't call it an olive branch, but I think it was a compromise between the chief of, fire chief versus the Director of Fire Services. So where there might be a angst of having the Director of Fire Services having that title, that stays, but again, as a compromise, we also included the volunteer coordinator as a advisory part of the fire staff, Butte-Silver fire staff, as a portion of that, as a compromise to what you were talking about. I think that's why that got in there. Plus, it would act as a intermediate between the fire services director and those members of fire chiefs of the volunteer fire departments. The volunteer fire departments will be the ones that will be appointing the volunteer fire coordinator, but it will be a member of the Butte-Silver Fire Department. So I think that's how that came about, and I think that's how we left it. So I don't think we've ever changed it. Director of Fire Services, I think that was in the old charter, and I think it remained as part of what we were doing here, versus adding on to the Director of Fire Coordinators, volunteer fire coordinators position within the charter.
Yeah, I understand that, but at the same time, looking at it from the other side, I still think that having that title should be another position all on its own, somebody that's neutral. And I think with the volunteer chief and Chief Osborne, I think they can work things out pretty well, and I don't see where it needs to be even in the charter to have that verbiage in there. The Director of Fire Services, that is.
So, Mr. Thielen, from your perspective then, what would the Director of Fire Services be doing that the chief isn't doing right now? How would that break?
Well, from what I understand back in the day, that the volunteers and the paid would both go to the Director of Fire Services, make their requests, whatever the director at that time decided, that was the final word. And whether that worked or not, it's kind of before my time a little bit, but I think it kind of did. The only thing I think that by giving Chief Osborne that title as well as being the chief, I think what that's done is that's what's created a lot of the animosity. And it's not that I don't think that Chief Osborne can do the job, because he's very capable, but I just think that if you remove that title, I think they think it'll put them more on an even plane.
Thank you for clarifying that. And I understand where you're coming from with that, Mr. Thielen. I think with this option 2, we're looking at a consolidation and, consolidating into one department, both volunteers and paid. Mr. Enruth?
Council, Commissioners, Commissioner Thielen, I wanted to look it up because Butte-Silver County operates under the municipal fire departments, part of the statutes and codes. Under 7-33-4104, duties of the chief and assistant chief of the fire department. The chief of the fire department has the sole command and control over all persons connected with the fire department of the city or town, and has full power and authority over its organization, government, and discipline. The chief may establish disciplinary rules that the chief considers advisable, subject to the approval of the city or county or town. The chief has charge of and is responsible for the engines and other apparatus in the property of the town or furnished to the fire department, and shall see that they're all in fit. Then there's some fire chiefs. So I don't know if the county did this on purpose or if they just labeled the director of fire, our chief of fires, our chief Osborne, the director of fire services, because we call everybody else the director. But the statute that they follow, that the county follows, gives him authority and control over all command and persons within the fire, the chief, all authority and control. So I just wanted the council to be aware that that's in statute.
And I understand that, and that's why I say it's kind of redundant to have that moniker put on him as well as being the chief. I mean, he's in control now. Why do you have to create the animosity by putting that title on top of him in addition to being the chief where he's already in charge of everything?
Mr. Dennehy?
Madam Chair, members of council, I think if we look at the strikeout version of what was handed out to us by County Attorney Inruth, we strike the paid fire chief from, in F, subsection F, the paid fire chief shall be the Director of Fire Services. I think that's what Ben was getting at. If we didn't strike that, it is that sort of, there's a paid fire chief.
Mr.
I
Dennehy?
removed it, right, I'm
It's
sorry.
moved to B.
Yeah, it's moved.
Oh, right. Okay, let's go back to B then.
So it was suggested last
Oh,
meeting
I'm
that we
sorry.
move it up,
Right.
that we define the paid fire chief as director. Mr. Silk?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I know that the confusion, and I understand it, and that was one of the reasons that Cindy, Ms. Dolan wanted to move it up in the charter, was to help clarify it more. I read it differently working in the system. I read this as the Director of Fire Services is in charge of the career department. This is almost the manager-director form, the title, in my opinion, where it doesn't necessarily matter. I do know that in '96, when they got rid of the fire coordinator, they switched to director, and I agree with Mr. Inruth. I've always kind of thought this because everyone else was a director, regardless of what department you're in. So that title, I believe, just came from that. I honestly think, and I know this with the bottom of my heart, whoever is the one that is spending the money is going to catch the blame. And with a limited amount of resources and a limited amount of money, that blame from the current Director of Fire Services is going to go just to someone else, because it all comes back to the money. They got rid of the fire coordinator because there was a duplication of services in 1996. And that is why they created one position where the paid fire chief is now the Director of Fire Services. Now, some of that language, I believe, is carried on from 1996. I would imagine any fire chief in other communities, they're all called fire chiefs. There's no other Director of Fire Services that I know of. But to me, it's still the same title, it's still the same position, and it has to come from the top down. And one thing that I want to mention is that we hear a lot about how there's going to be this wand, or there's this king or queen at the top, and they're the ones spending the money. And it's so not true. The Council of Commissioners approve a budget. The chief executive or city manager make the budget. The directors put in for what they think they need. And if employees or personnel believe that they think they need more within their budget that the director of any department did put in for, they come up during the budgeting process and they ask for that within their budget. And I know that to be true talking with other directors. So there's this scary thing out there that the Director of Fire Services in the future is only going to have their budget, it's their money to spend. And I've been explained by this, or this was explained to me, and it was very, very enlightening about how this process truly works, because I know this person understands it. It's the chief executive's budget that allows the directors to spend what they are approved for. So this fear that there's not going to be anything for the volunteers, I encourage you to talk to the Director of Fire Services and see how many requests were put in and how many meetings were held after an offer was put out to come up and have a budget. Putting it into the charter isn't going to make it happen anymore. It's already a law in the ordinance. So there's two different things. There's the budgetary thing that we're kind of scared about, and then I believe there's the title of the paid fire chief and the director of fire services that we're talking about. I believe those paid fire chief and director of fire services, it's just clearing it up in the charter that the director of fire services is in charge, the chief of the career department. And then the budgetary standpoint is something else. And if anyone has any questions on how that works, please ask.
Mr. Thielen?
You know, Chad, I kind of agree, but I really got to be the devil's advocate here and disagree, because the statute that Mr. Enris recited was the chief is in charge of everything. And that simple title, Director of Fire Services, that's what's pissing everybody off. And so why rub salt in an open wound, right? Just do away with that. He's still in charge by statute. You know, that's the only thing I'm saying, and I think it'll make everybody else breathe a little easier.
Mr. Enruth, if we change that, if we were to strike shall be and just go the paid fire chief shall be responsible for the administrative coordination, does that change anything legally or structurally from your point of view?
Chairman Brandel, yes. So that's what I was just going to state was it's made clear that the fire chief is also the director of fire services, and then you go to those next paragraphs that we're adding in. The director of fire services will have administrative, operational, budgetary, and coordination control. So you would have to change that title, director of fire services, in all of those as well. Otherwise, you would have two separate titled individuals with competing obligations, one directed by statute, one directed by charter, and that is the one thing a charter cannot do. It cannot violate state statute. And a paid fire chief's responsibilities are in statute. I genuinely think it's a title. I think Butte-Silver did it as a title. If you wanted it all the same and he's not the director of fire services, he's the paid fire chief, don't call him the director of fire services. You just change the language up, shall direct all fire services, and then you change that language and the additional ones too, that they all fall under the authority of the paid fire chief and council of commissioners. Paid fire chief shall establish all of these things. Yeah, that's the one thing we can't do is go against state law. So you can't have a director of fire services having all of the same authority that a chief does as well. I'm genuinely of the opinion that they called him the director of fire services because it went with how Butte-Silver is structured. We have directors of departments.
That makes sense to me.
I mean, it makes perfect sense on it because, I mean, by statute under the municipal code, those are all of the things. So if you don't want to call him the director of fire services, you don't have to. You can change it up to the paid fire chief shall direct all fire services and be responsible for all the things. Director of fire services changes to paid fire chief, same thing. Because it's the same person. I mean, it's the same duties.
Mr. Thielen?
I understand that, and thanks for clearing it up. But however, even though he is the director of the department, he's still the chief. And that's the state law, state statute calls him the chief. The charter is calling him the director. So did Butte-Silver go against state statute by naming him the director and having to have two titles?
No, I don't believe so because it's the same person. But if you split it, that's when you're going to be having an issue with who has controlling authority in the statute. So if there's a director of fire services and we give the director of fire services the operational standards of training, response time, protocol, equipment, policies applicable to all fire agencies, that will be in direct violation of state statute because you will have someone else that is superseding by charter the paid fire chief. So no, since it's one and the same person, I don't think it violates the statute. What I'm saying is if you wanted to get rid of the director title, you could, and just go with paid fire chief, but the paid fire chief by statute is in control of a municipality's, fire services. They're the head of the fire department. So that's why I'm saying, I think they just started calling them the director, gave it a director title. Maybe it was a money thing back in the day. Maybe they gave him a salary bump because of all of the responsibilities. I don't know. But if they're one and the same person, I don't think it violates statute. If you split it and you give the director of fire services control over a chief, I think that directly violates the state statute that I pulled up.
Right. Well, I think for the sake of an argument and having everybody upset and turning the apple cart over, I'd like to see that director taken out and just be the chief. That way there, at some point, somebody's not going to say, hey, you guys are doing this and it's against state statute. That's the problem we're having now with that 1979 law. So I just think that having the chief be the chief and just take that verbiage out, the director of fire services, he's still in charge. And if somebody wants to call him the director, they can. But I think by just having it be the chief shall, I think that would be better off than having the director of fire services in there. It just kind of clears it up.
Mr. Thielen, I think that last week the commission worked really hard to try to clarify and condense language, so I don't think people would be opposed, but I'd like to open it up to our colleagues to discuss if we could. Ms. Shaw?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really appreciate all the discussion so far in this, but to me, the bottom line is by just changing a title is not change the functionality of the position. And I don't think that's going to make anybody any happier unless they misconstrue the title, eliminating the title. Suddenly they think it's changed the function of that department head. So, I mean, it might sound nice on paper, but I don't see how it's going to really, people still be upset when they think we're trying to pull one over. It just seems odd to me because it doesn't change the function by the state law that person does that. Our charter says the fire chief shall be the fire coordinator, the director of fire services. So I get what Ben's saying, and I'm actually feeling the same way you do because of the animosity and everything, but I don't think that that's going to really change anything. It might give the impression that it does change something. That's my comment.
Mr. Dennehy?
Madam Chair, members of the commission, I think the issue is because there's a paid fire chief and then there's 9 volunteer fire chiefs. Then we get into the question of, okay, the paid fire chief is he or she the director of all the other volunteer fire chiefs? This makes it fairly clear that the fire chief is called the director of fire services. So there's the director of fire services and the 9 fire chiefs from volunteers. And I think this is a little bit easier to understand than paid fire chief, volunteer fire chief, volunteer fire chief, volunteer fire chief, 9 of them. And I think this delineates that clearly, and it does not change state law, as County Attorney Enruth has said. I think that the Director of Fire Services language is appropriate at this time. I'm not adverse to what Ben is saying. I get what he's saying. He's been saying it since he was on here, and I appreciate that. But I think the Director of Fire Services is a little bit easier to understand and doesn't convolute the paid fire chief and 9 other fire chiefs. So I would like to keep it as it is. That's just my comments, and we can vote on it.
Mr. Silk?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's important, too, to bring up that the Director of Fire Services is the only position within the fire department that can, the Fire Commission opens it up to anyone who wants to apply for the Director of Fire Services. So if people have issues with the way the fire departments run right now, and they don't work for a career department, they still can try to be the Director of Fire Services because it's...
Mr. Silk, I don't think so.
No.
Well, so just in this last, yes, it is that way. The last appointment of the Director of Fire Services there was, I believe, 3 candidates that were outside of the career department. And there have been other candidates outside of the career department in the past. So if that's run through ordinate, test applicants for appointment of the Director of Fire Services, that doesn't necessarily mean, because what we need to look at is the ordinance. Okay.
Ms. Casey?
A follow-up to Mr. Selks, what he was explaining. So potentially, they would have hired someone, if somebody outside of the career department were to get the Director of Fire Services, you still have a paid fire chief? Or did they have a fire chief status and that allowed them to apply for the position?
Thank you, Ms. Casey. That is correct. There is always the capability to have other people outside of the career department to be the Director of Fire Services, which is the paid fire chief. I know that for sure.
Thank you for the clarification. I think we're all going to the qualifications, that you have to be a fire chief in order to be that. So here we are with the ambiguity of the titles and language.
No, you've got to be a chief.
Are there other questions? Ms. McCormick?
Well, I just want to go back to my concerns about, we basically, you can say that it's going to be spelled out in ordinance, and then ordinance is more nimble. But here, we're vesting all budget authority shall be exercised through the Director of Fire Services and the Council of Commissioners. There's no ambiguity there. And when we had originally voted on this, we talked about the volunteers being able to submit their budgets to the Council of Commissioners. And I specifically remember County Attorney Inruth talking about how in the legal department, you have different offices that prepare and submit budgets. It's not this, you don't prepare, there isn't one, I don't know, I'm sorry, I don't know how your department is organized, and if you're the head of it, but there isn't one person that's a head of that legal department that puts together everybody else's budgets. So the idea that that's the way this has to be, the director is the one who puts together the whole budget. It's not how it's necessarily done in other departments. And, my thought, when I hear, you hear lots of things and you can go back and forth and you don't know what the truth, whose side, who's saying what, but I do think, money is power, and having the authority to say what you need is important. And sometimes I think with the volunteers, why they haven't been able to get it together sometimes to put together budgets and things like that is because they are volunteers. And they're really, really, really busy with other things. And in some ways, probably some of these budget issues are kind of more complicated and over their head. What I'm really hoping is if something like this passes, and they're made part of the local government, that Butte-Silver Bowl will provide more technical support, administrative assistance to the volunteer departments so that they're more capable and have better abilities to get this kind of thing done. And as far as the volunteer coordinator, that's not a person with any power or position. All the authority is still vested in the Director of Fire Services, but what I see is that person can be somebody that can go out and say, okay, it's budget time. We have to put our budgets together. You guys have to do this. This is the way. We have a format now how to do it, just so they have the opportunity to put their budgets together and have it go through, and so they can, people can see what their needs are, because I think that's very important instead of it just being kind of hidden away and, one person or and the Council of Commissioners gets to decide things, and the volunteers don't have any say. And especially with budget authority, I think it's just so essential. I can see we're training, we need to, but that's where I see the volunteer coordinator could be so instrumental in improving relationships if they can be the one to help coordinate and help the volunteers get things done that they need to get done to be a fully functioning entity within the Butte-Silver Bowl government.
Ms. McCormick, would you want that spelled out as a role, perhaps, in F, that there shall be a volunteer fire coordinator to serve as the representative of the volunteer fire departments and liaison? The volunteer fire coordinator, some sort of language, will assist volunteer departments with preparing and submitting an annual budget or something to that effect?
That's fine there, but I still think I like what we said better in the old thing where that the volunteer departments will submit annual budgets to the council of or to the fire chief, and those will go to the council of commissioners for consideration.
Okay, I'm going to defer to Mr. Enruth, but I think we took those separations out because of the budget department's authority here, and then also because this language is trying to consolidate. But Mr. Enruth, please.
Council Commissioners, that's how it works. So that's how it works in my office too, is Mike Clegg and Darla McCarthy put together their budgets, give them to me, and then we submit them all up to the director, our budget director, Karen Hassler. So they put together their budgets for DUI court, Veterans Court, and Darla puts hers together for victim services and her victim advocate budget. They get given to me, I don't touch them, and then they go right to, they get submitted with me or with my budget to Karen's budget. I think the difference is how they're delineated in the book, the budget book that we get, where I can see their separate budgets, like if they're different line items or something like that. I don't know if the volunteer firefighters' budgets are separated out that way, but I do know by ordinance, they are required to put their budgets together and then give them to Director Osborne to present to Director Hassler. So that is in the ordinance, and they do have that authority as of right now. And I think 3 maybe 4 of them did it this year, was all, not very many.
Right, and I'm trying to recall the conversation last week because we were trying to be not overly prescriptive through charter to tell the department heads how to operate.
Correct.
And we felt like that language might be too operational for Ms. Hasler's department in terms of breaking out those budgets, et cetera. So we're trying to be, that was the conversation I recall from last week, Ms. McCormick.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate the clarification, but to me, it just, it's like you took all the authority and put it over here. And I can't help but believe that, that gives them all the authority when you say that in the charter like that. I don't think, how can we make it so we are sure that the volunteers will have the authority to put their budgets together, and those budgets will go up the whatever, and be seen by the Council of Commissioners.
I believe we said through ordinance, and we can add language to that volunteer fire coordinator's role.
What do you mean by ordinance?
It's in ordinance that they
It's the law.
submit their budgets currently.
To the Council of Commissioners?
They submit them through the Director of Fire Services, just like my office submits theirs through me. They get submitted.
For me, I don't know how it can be, and maybe it can be, I think there's a lot of things that the volunteer coordinator can do to make things much better relationships between the paid and the volunteers. That's just one of the things that they can do to help some of the procedural problems that are in existence right now. So I don't know, singling that out, I don't want to single that out and make it seem like that's all the volunteer coordinator is going to be responsible for, but it just seems to me that that would be one of the most important things. So, I don't know. So this ordinance that we have already, that's going to still be in play?
Correct.
Do you want to add that to that? Do you want to add that language in here? We're working on markup, and then we'll go forward to voting on this if we can get there tonight.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I'm just concerned, I hate to just single out this one. It doesn't really address my concerns. It doesn't address my concerns.
Mr. Silk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's important that we realize when we go to this, if we're going to follow this charter, that it's clear that there's a lot that can be run through ordinance. And I know that maybe some ordinances aren't followed, but if they are and there's no participation, my fear is, what happens if a volunteer, you mentioned that they're very busy, might not put a budget together? What happens if there's no budget submitted to keep the lights on? What happens if there was imagine the Public Works Department having their managers submit budgets to the Council of Commissioners and not able to get on an entire plan, even though they're the director of that department? It would be a mess. A lot of the stuff that we are doing, if option 2 passes, again, if it passes, is run through ordinance. And that's not any different than what it was in 1977 when it gave power, when the charter gave power to our ordinance. The Council of Commissioners, if they don't like the way that something's done, hopefully they'll fix it. Just because it's mentioned in the charter doesn't mean that it's going to happen more. If anyone has questions on where the money's spent, ask the Director of Fire Services, ask any department. Again, remember, it's not the Director of Fire Services budget, it's the Chief Executive's budget.
Mr. Enruth, can I ask you to kind of back up to last week a little bit with the revisions that you proposed, so that we can kind of get that history back here again, since we have Mr. Thielen and Ms. McCormick who were not here last week?
Yes. So the revisions that I have proposed to changing the charter language specifically relate to the Montana Attorney General's opinion with regards to the current volunteer fire departments and rural fire departments' position that they have their full authority over their budgets and what they do. The Montana Attorney General's opinion, in my position, is actually only budgetarily specific, stating that they have full authority over their budgets. The reason being is the current charter does not address their budgets or their control, because state law is specific. If the charter, not an ordinance, a charter does not state a county's authority over volunteer and rural fire districts that were in existence prior to consolidation, Montana state law holds. So the charter's is only half clear on it. It gave the Director of Fire Services authority over them, but it was not clear on the budgetary authority as well. So what I have done is specific to 7.03 Section D. The current charter language is, except as otherwise provided by charter until changed by ordinance, the organization of existing volunteer fire departments within the city count shall be governed by applicable sections of state law. It's their organizational aspect, right? Except that the chief executive shall have the executive and administrative powers and duties of the chair of the Board of County Commissioners, and the Council of Commissioners shall have their legislative powers and duties of the County Board of County Commissioners as provided by state law. It didn't explicitly lay out all the things that it needed to in order to give the county full operational control over volunteer and rural fire departments as it sought to do so. So the new language is very clear. Except as otherwise provided by this charter, all volunteer fire departments and rural fire districts located within the city, county are hereby consolidated into and made part of the Butte-Silver Fire Department, excluding the areas and towns of Walkerville and Melrose, Montana. Melrose, Montana is being added into the charter just so it is clear that we are not trying to do something to their district because it is included in the county. All duties, powers, and responsibilities previously vested by Montana law and the boards of trustees or governing bodies of such volunteer or rural fire districts, excluding the areas within the towns of Walkerville and Melrose, Montana, shall be extinguished and are now exercised by Butte-Silver County and the Butte-Silver County Butte-Silver County Council of Commissioners, unless otherwise provided by this charter or ordinance. You can't just say ordinance, it's also got to be in the charter, which is why it's specific in the next sections that in the language we currently have as Director of Fire Services. But the administration, operational control, budgetary authority, and coordination of all fire protection services, including all volunteer and rural fire departments, is now exercised by BSB, the Director of Fire Services, and the Council of Commissioners, and the Director of Fire Services shall establish all of the things as required by statute. That makes it very, very clear that the volunteer fire departments and rural fire departments are now incorporated into the county and governed by the county. They're not governed by Montana state law. They are governed by the charter. If that passes, this would be the language that provides the county and the Director of Fire Services or the chief full operational and budgetary control. That's just what the charter doesn't do right now. It doesn't explicitly lay all that out. In fact, it puts half of it in there and then gives them authority through Montana state law for the other half. And that's really what creates the confusion.
Thank you, Mr. Enruth. I appreciate you going back through that. I recall some of the conversation last week too being about the recommendations that we need to make, that this is like a deep section of recommendations, acknowledging that personalities are personalities and there's work to be done to create a working environment that's healthy and functional between the groups. But that, maybe this budget delineation in the budget book could be part of those recommendations. That's a possibility. I do have a question, Mr. Enruth. We talked last week about Melrose, Montana, and Ms. Casey, you know this question more technically than I do. Would you mind leading that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Because Melrose and the taxing district out there includes more than just the town proper, if you will, of Melrose, I was wondering if it would be clearer to say the Melrose Fire District versus the town of Melrose.
Yes, I agree with that, and I saw that in the email. And yes, because the town of Walkerville is specific. It's got its own boundaries and stuff. Yes, the Melrose Fire District would be a better way to say it, yes. And we'll want to make sure that is the actual title of the district. It could be some weird, like Melrose something district. But yes.
Thank you. Commissioners, I'd like to continue walking through these revisions, and then, if possible, I'd like to get us to a vote tonight so that we can dump it into our final report and get things moving out the door, recognizing that there's concerns and that there's some strategic advice here maybe with regards to titles. So the first section is there shall be a fire department, We added in fire protection services within the city, county, or declared through this charter to be unified governmental function of the consolidated government. County Attorney Enruth again is spelling out that unification there. Our group moved section B to the top. It previously was section F, I think. And so we moved that to the top at the recommendation of Ms. Purdue-Dolan, and that we wanted to make sure that we're spelling out who is responsible for administrative coordination and the combination of the paid and volunteer fire departments. In section C, I don't think we did anything in section C.
You redlined all of that.
Okay,
Madam Chair?
yes.
In section C, we wanted to make it more general, so we just said that the ordinance should, the membership and the powers and duties of a fire commission, the council of commissioners would establish the ordinance that outlined how many members, what their powers and duties would be. And we had stricken all of, I think there was 4 different items of what the commission was gonna do per the charter, going back to keeping the charter more general and allowing the commission to be driven by ordinance.
Thank you. And I think we had 2 Cs. So I think the first C, we didn't take anything out of that paragraph, correct? And then the former second C, which would be section D, we strike everything after fire commission. So that section would read, the council of commissioners shall establish by ordinance the membership of and the powers and duties of a fire commission. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and then we would have E, which would be the new language proposed by County Attorney Enruth. And he went through that just moments ago, with the exception of the change in about the 4th line, that it would be Towns of Walkerville and the Melrose Fire District, and we'll check on that language, that that's the name of that district. Okay, and then F, it was formerly E, it would be F, the administration, operational control, budgetary authority, and coordination of all fire protection services, including all volunteer and rural fire departments, shall be exercised through the Butte-Silver Fire Department and under the authority of the Director of Fire Services. Mr. Silk had recommended adding the Chief Executive or City Manager and the Council of Commissioners, just so that that reflects the same language that is up above in section A. Or excuse me, C.
Madam
Ms.
Chair?
Ms. Casey.
Could you go over that again, because I have where there was a E that was stricken, and that was about the advisory committee. And then the F we moved up to B, and then there was a new F that began, there shall be a volunteer fire coordinator. So am I missing something, or?
Our lettering is out of order.
Okay.
So we would be.
So would you repeat what you said then, please?
Yeah, so in the, if you're looking at the print version, oh, is the second paragraph. I guess that's just a second paragraph of E, excuse me. So that wouldn't be another F. That's just a second paragraph of E. Okay, got it. And so in that second paragraph of E is that change that Mr. Silk had recommended or was wanting us to think about, was Director of Fire Services, Chief Executive or City Manager, and the Council of Commissioners, just so that it was clear as it is in C above.
Chairwoman Brandel, I think I understand your question. Ms. Casey, so if you look, we have it labeled E right now. So it'll read, the administration, operational control, budgetary authority, and coordination of all fire protection services, including all volunteer and rural fire departments, shall be exercised through the Butte-Silver Fire Department under the authority of the Director of Fire Services. We need to add in there the Chief Executive or Mayor and the Council of Commissioners. And then that same language, authority of Director of Fire Services, CEO/Mayor, and Council of Commissioners, will also be directly after the Director of Fire Services in the next paragraph. They'll read identical, so all 3 bodies have operational control. And then that actually then corresponds directly with all of the current ordinances and everything that are in place, because the council has already divvied up a lot of those duties to the Director of Fire Services, but kept certain ones for themselves. So Commissioner Silk's recommendation that we keep that language the same and consistent through both sections of that is appropriate. And yes, it will be specifically section E all the way through there, and then F will be down there at the bottom.
Okay, and then, yes, so the former sections E and F were taken out completely, with the exception of F is moved up. And then the new F is there shall be a volunteer fire coordinator to serve as the representative of the volunteer fire departments and the liaison to the director of fire service in advisory capacity. The volunteer fire coordinator shall be selected by the volunteer membership. And then in the 1 and 2 in section H, I think we added in Melrose, and Melrose, Montana was added in, so that would also be the Melrose Fire District in part 1 of F. Excuse me, G, H, all our lettering's off. On our sheet, it's the last 2 statements there.
So that needs to be fire district.
And then Mr. and Ruth, we had a question, it was mathematical last week, about any ordinance changing the boundaries of existing fire districts shall require an affirmative vote by 2/3 of the whole number of the Council of Commissioners. And if we have 4 and a mayor, what do we need here?
Whole number is defined as a full council.
Okay,
That's all it is.
okay.
Yeah.
All right, so we don't
It
have
just
to.
means you got to have everybody there to vote on it.
Okay.
Yeah, and we had this discussion because of the current request to change the boundary district. Yeah, you have to have the whole commission and 2/3 of it. It's the same thing for selling a piece of property. You have to have a whole commission and get 2/3 vote.
Okay, all right. So we don't have to be like a person and a third of a person.
Nope,
So
nope, you need
3/5.
you need 2/3 of all of them.
Okay. I figured it was a legal term and not a mathematical term. In that section, we also struck out or relocating firefighting equipment. We again felt that was too prescriptive, Mr. Enruth.
Yes, and I agreed with that. That's
Okay.
fine. It should just be with regards to changing the boundary districts.
Okay. Ms. McCormick?
Excuse me. I mean, maybe you think it's too prescriptive, but I think those volunteers, their equipment, their fire trucks and that's their pride and joy. There's, that's one of their biggest fears is that all of a sudden they're gonna have absolutely no say over things that they've worked hard through grants and efforts to secure. And the fire chief or director of fire services, whoever that may be, is going to be able to shuffle things around at will. It's really, to me, it's going to really destroy the real essence of what the volunteer fire departments, whether they're included within the city county government or not. You're taking a big part of what is very important to them away. And it's sad.
Ms. McCormick, I think the rationale or the discussion last week again was about pragmatically, they shuffle things around already. So would we need to come before the commission to work within the department, work together to move something from one part to the other? I think that if my colleagues could help me out with what the discussion was about. Ms. Shaw?
I'll take a stab at it. I don't think that equipment can be shuffled around arbitrarily. It has to be, anytime anything is done, I remember if we had bleachers at Civic Center, you know, or whatever, move things around, you just can't just do that without the authority of council of commissioners. It'd be a line item on agenda, I do believe. So, and you know, I understand Mary's concern too, because we don't want to assume all that, but that usually is a process if something is been changed around and it has to be, you know, has to be good reason, and then the council would make that decision. That's my recollection. So.
And personally, I'm ambivalent to whether it stays in or goes out, you know, just depending on what needs to make things work. If we feel that it's, you know, needs to be spelled out, that we don't want things, or we don't recommend things changing or equipment moving from one firehouse to the other or something. But I trusted some of our colleagues' discussion about what it's like in practice. Mr. Silk?
Thank you, Madam Chair. One of the reasons that we talked about it is from real life, knowing actually what happens. When we struck out or reallocating firefighting equipment, does that need 2/3 vote of council of commissioners? We have apparatus at Station 1 and Station 2 that go back and forth all the time because they're breaking down. Do we need to wait for council of commissioners to have a 2/3 vote before we can do that?
Mr. Enruth?
Also, this doesn't work in practice as of right now with the volunteers. They reallocate their equipment all the time to the DNRC, to everybody without council permission. I think they do. I'm almost positive they do. As I say, I think everybody right now, I don't think that's being followed. Just so everybody's aware. I mean, I read that agenda pretty carefully every week, and I've never once seen, you know, a request to, a lot of times those requests just come through Chief Osborne and the volunteers, and they just sign off on them and send them out. Now, when they get the money back, or the DNRC's paying and it gets added to the budget, that comes through council. But I haven't seen where we're having a 2/3 vote of a whole number of council of commissioners for reallocating fire equipment. I'm just saying I haven't seen it in practice. On either side.
Mr. Silk?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just a point of clarification, the volunteers don't get contracted out to the DNRC. So their equipment would not be reallocated to, say, the DNRC. But that brings up a good point, that when a brush unit from a career department is sent to the DNRC, does that need 2/3 vote of a whole number of commissioners to make money for the department? When in theory and in history, that is one of the only capital improvement plans for apparatus that is out there, because that's a way to generate money. All right, so there are multiple reasonings that reallocating firefighter equipment, if an SCBA breaks and it has to be worked on at Station 1 from an SCBA technician, that shouldn't need a 2/3 vote to go fix that. The operational equipment of moving trucks from Station 1 to Station 2, I don't believe needs a 2/3 vote from the Council of Commissioners. I also wouldn't think that the Director of Public Works would need 2/3 vote for move one piece of equipment to another piece of equipment just within the roads and parks and things like that. So that was the basis behind it. It wasn't anything just to like try to grab something else, which I get a feeling that is what you're insinuating at. All this stuff can be run through ordinance. If something does not work out, the Council of Commissioners, Chief Executive, have full authority to run the community as they want. Full authority.
Mr. Silk, I think Ms. McCormick's concern is valid from the perspective of the volunteers of, you know, this is our assigned engine and we want to keep it at our firehouse. And I think our intention would be that yes, that's how people are treated and how the volunteers departments are run. I think we're trying to give the, we're trying to make sure that we're compliant within our own operations currently, and trying to make sure that we're allowing for there to be some nimble discussion between volunteers and the career. Mr. Dennehy.
Madam Chair, members of commissions, if I recall, I think what we were talking about last week is in an emergency situation where there was a major fire either in town or out of town in the rural districts, that typically happen every dry summer, that we wouldn't be hamstrung in terms of using the volunteers' equipment. We then come to the council and say, we need 2/3 vote of the council so that we can take the tender somewhere to stop a fire, whether it's in Silver Bow County or outside of Silver Bow County. And then have that discussion after the fact, saying, well, we did that because it was an emergency situation and we didn't want to be hamstrung about that sort of process. But I don't see this as, okay, we get to take Terra Verde's equipment and put it in Station 1 or 2 because I say we can. I think it's more of an emergency situation that can happen, and it doesn't need the council approval.
Ms. McCormick?
Yeah, it just seems to me that there's different situations. There's an emergency situation where your fire truck goes and used by another, a volunteer's truck is used by the paid, or a paid truck is used by a volunteer, or a paid truck goes to a fire in California. That's one thing, but it's the permanent, that's what I'm concerned about, is if you have a volunteer department has their fire truck and it's permanently reallocated someplace else and they don't get it back. That's, I guess, what my concern is.
So that's actually not a terrible suggestion. Like, we could say any ordinance of changing boundaries of existing fire districts or permanently reallocating firefighting equipment. I mean, I think that would satisfy the concern, wouldn't it?
And I think it makes it clear. Because I genuinely want to say, and pardon me, I don't mean to interrupt, that's what it's meant for. It's meant so you can't just give a fire truck to like the DNRC or take someone's and move it. I think that's what I think it's meant for.
Okay. All right. So we would add in the word permanently reallocating firefighting equipment in that section. Mr. Enworth, can you look again at C, except as otherwise provided in the charter? And then we reference and said, so in the last sentence we say, as provided in said state law, and the fire commission shall have those powers and duties as set forth in subsection 7.03C. Which subsection are we referencing now? E?
You'll be No, it needs to be changed because the fire commission no longer has duties and powers anymore. You've removed them and you're requiring the council to establish them by ordinance. So it would be 7.03D.
D. Okay. Thank you. Folks, I realize there's a lot of markup here, so maybe let's take a minute, and then I'd like to see if we can move this forward as the language that would be offered for the charter if option 2 is passed by the electorate.
Madam Chair,
Ms. Casey?
in the second paragraph of E, the last sentence, do we need to change that with the addition of permanently reallocating requires council's approval? Because as I read this, it gives the Director of Fire Services, includes the distribution, use, and transfer of fire protection equipment, apparatus, and facilities in order to promote efficient fire protection services. To me, we're saying in one place you can't do that permanently, and in this section, I kind of read it like he could.
Mr. Enruth?
It needs to state, comma, unless otherwise provided by charter. Yep, that's one of those sections where it needs to read, except as otherwise provided by this charter, in the very first part of it.
So, Mr. Enruth, you would put except as otherwise provided by this charter at the very first paragraph?
Yep, the very first sentence. Except as otherwise provided by this charter, the Director of Fire Services, comma, the chief executive language, council language, shall establish operational standards and requirements, response protocols, and equipment policies applicable to all agencies. Period. Yeah, you have to have except as otherwise provided by charter. Thank you for catching that.
Ms. McCormick?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think we should just strike that whole last sentence. This includes the distribution, use, and transfer of fire protection equipment, apparatus, and facilities in order to promote efficient protection services. I mean, isn't that something that can be handled in ordinance? Why even have that there?
Because it's the state laws why I put it in there.
Pardon?
But it's the state laws why I put it in there, under the chief fire.
Because
under
it states that in state law?
Yeah. Yeah, that's why it's just reincorporated into the charter.
I think it should be struck. That's just my opinion.
So with that qualifying statement at the beginning, except as otherwise provided in this charter, it would exclude transferring, permanently transferring equipment. I forget the word we used in that list. Permanently reallocating fire equipment. But then this still, if we leave this in, it still allows the fire director, I'm kind of mix it all up now, the chief to use and transfer in order to promote efficient fire, so that it gives us that authority to do things in those emergency situations.
Yes.
Mr. Silk?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe that that is still appropriate, especially because of the addition of permanently added in section H, subsection 1. If that truly is the fear that things will be moved around permanently, any director should have the ability and authority to move things as needed, given the situation. I think it's still appropriate. Because that doesn't just necessarily mean that moving equipment, it also means, as it states above, the response protocols, but there's a description of the distribution, use, and transfer of fire equipment. That's how I read it, knowing just coming from a different world within the fire service.
Ms. Shaw?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just get back to semantics here. Could it say this includes the distribution, use, and temporary transfer of fire equipment? I mean, it puts the word temporary in there, so it's not a given that it can just stay there forever. You know, I don't know if that quantifies or qualifies what that is. I'll defer to our county attorney on that one.
So, I need to make a statement on section 2 with regards to this. I understand everybody's position on trying to be fair to everybody, but the whole point of this particular modification, if passed by the city itself, is to give full operational control to the county. That's the point of it. By doing these other things, that's getting back into the split authoritative roles. I do believe Ms. Shaw's comment would make it clear that that the Director of Fire Services and the Chief can't permanently move one thing to the next. But when you're looking at the two different sections, one is removing volunteers from the charter and allowing them to completely function autonomously under Montana law. The other option is to fully incorporate them into Butte-Silver County and giving one individual full operational control and authority over their department. By splitting hairs like this, you're starting to create that, again, division within the authoritative control of the one person. I'm just sitting here thinking to myself, if the charter was written that my chief deputy county attorney had operational control over criminal cases and I had no authority to direct them on such a matter, it doesn't mean anything. You have multiple people in charge at that time. I just want to say that to the council, that I do think that some of these are appropriate and it makes things clear. I do think that permanently at the very end actually makes it clear on what that is supposed to do. But if you start chopping it up, you start splitting up the operational and budgetary and authoritative control again into two separate parts, which is the problem. But temporary would be just fine there. It would not coexist. It would go directly with what it means in section H, which is permanently, that they would temporarily have the authority to temporarily reallocate things throughout their department. But then again, that's giving other individuals that aren't Butte-Silver County employees, volunteers from the outside, authoritative control over a Butte-Silver County department. That's my problem with it is if section 2 passes, you want it to be very clear. There's one person in charge. There's one entity in charge. It is the county, and this is what the county is doing.
Well, and looking at the section 2, it just says the director, the chief of executive or city manager, and the council of commissioners shall establish the operational standards for these things. So they could come up with what it means to be permanently transferring or temporarily transferring things,
Correct.
right? So I don't see the need to be prescriptive there, because we, again, want to empower the people to do the work. All right, other concerns or questions with this document? I realize this is the deep sausage making, so. Yes, Mr. Thielen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Mr. Enruth, if that was stricken out, couldn't the council then decide what to do with it instead of us making the decision if we took it out? Isn't it up to the council to decide what's what?
If you remove the last sentence there,
Yeah.
it would be yes. because we're adding in, except as otherwise provided by charter, the Director of Fire Services, CEO or Mayor, and Council of Commissioners shall establish operational standards and training.
So we could take it out and then it'd be up to the council to put it in how they see fit, correct?
Yeah, it would be up to the council.
Okay.
Well, it would be up to those three bodies. Technically, the council could say, Director of Fire Services, this is your authority, you do it, but yes, that's how it could go down the chain.
Thank you.
Mr. Enright, that
And-
last sentence is in state law, is that correct?
Yes, it's under there. It's under this section of a fire chief's authority, but I had these pulled up. I want to say, here we go. Section 2.1. Where's our 16? If we look under chapter 2.16 in the fire department, those are our ordinances. There are established a lot of ordinances as well with regards to, the Director of Services Authority, overpaid, over volunteers, certification of payrolls, volunteer chiefs. I thought I saw in here. I'm not seeing it now, but I thought there was an ordinance with regards to all of that as well. But the reason I included it was because I was trying to make it very, very clear that the county had full authority over all of it, rather than our original one. So if you go back to D, except as otherwise provided by this charter or until changed by ordinance, this is what you have. It's, here's all of your authority, and you can use ordinances to modify that in any way you want. So they have full operational authority over all of these things, including how to run these things, and then you can use the ordinance to change it, to provide more depth to it.
So you're clarifying this as an authority.
Yes, this includes, distribution, use, and transfer, so that way you're not saying, it gives them the authority for the things that are in the previous sentence. It can be removed because the previous sentence does specifically lay out, requirements for response protocols, all equipment policies. I just went the step further and included distribution, use, and transfer of fire equipment apparatus. I was trying to be very, very specific on the county gets all of it if this is what the people vote on.
Thoughts? Do we want to strike that last sentence, keep it in? Strike or keep in? Ms. Shaw, you raised your hand, I think. Nope. Yeah.
Madam Chair, would it be easier for us in the long run to go through section or like subsection by subsection and vote on them to get through this without, I'm sorry, but we have spent an awful lot of time on this, and we spent an awful lot of time last week, and in part we seem to go back to something or we do something. Maybe we should just vote subsection by subsection and move on.
Perfect.
I agree.
I'm totally in favor of that. We bounced around tonight, and we needed to have some catch-up conversation, so we appreciate the redirection. So with that, let's start with Section 7.03, Fire Department, Section A. There shall be a fire department which shall be comprised of the paid fire department and volunteer fire departments in the city county. Fire protection services within the city county are declared through this charter to be a unified governmental function of the consolidated government. So for that,
Madam Chair, I would make a motion that we approve subsection A as you just read, and it is in the written document.
Second.
so I have a motion from Casey and a second from Dennehy. And I'll go ahead and take our roll call vote. So Ms. Casey,
Aye.
Mr. Thielen, Mr. Dennehy, Mr. Soak, Ms. Shaw, Ms. McCormick, and I also vote aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Yes,
Just a point of order, maybe you should ask if, on the question, like after the.
I apologize. We have been in our chairs for a
I know
long
we've
time.
talked about everything,
and
but-
discussing this a long time, so I apologize for my impatience. So, Mr. Enruth, there were no changes to B and no changes to C, correct? Except for we changed the
Position of.
position D, and we did change B. We've added that. We've moved it from the beginning, from the end. So let's go ahead and vote on that. So we'd be moving B. The paid fire chief shall be the director of fire services and shall be responsible for the administrative coordination and combination of the paid and volunteer fire departments, fire prevention, and code enforcement. Ms. Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would move to approve section 7.03 sub B.
So I have a motion from Shaw and a second from Mr. Silk. Is there any further discussion? Okay, Ms. McCormick, I'll start on, go ahead, Mr. Thielen.
You know, I still don't like that term, Director of Fire Services. And I'm sorry, and it's like beating a dead horse, but it was 30 years ago. I still think it should come out. And so with that, no matter what, if it's going to stay, I'm going to vote nay.
Okay. Any further discussion? Ms. McCormick? Ms. Shaw?
Aye.
Mr. Silk?
Aye.
Mr. Dennehy?
Aye.
Mr. Thielen?
Nay.
Ms. Casey?
Aye.
And I also vote aye. Motion carries. All right, subsection C, that was not changed other than to reference the proper section now.
Correct.
Folks, do we need to vote on that since it hasn't changed? Ms. Shaw?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would move to approve section 7.03 sub C with the amendment to the subsection 7.03D at the end there.
Second.
So I have a motion from Shaw and a second from Dennehy. Further discussion? Ms. Casey?
Aye.
Mr. Thielen? Mr. Dennehy?
Aye.
Mr. Silk?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw?
Aye.
Ms. McCormick? I also vote aye. Motion carries. New section D, the Council of Commissioners shall establish by ordinance the membership of and the powers and duties of the Fire Commission. Ms. Keith?
Madam Chair, I would make a motion that we approve section 7.03 subsection D.
I have a motion from Casey and a second from Thielen. Further discussion? Okay, Ms. McCormick? Ms.
Shaw.
Shaw?
Aye, just call me Cindy.
Mr. Silk?
Aye.
Mr. Dennehy?
Aye.
Mr. Thielen?
Aye.
Ms. Casey?
Aye.
I also vote aye. Motion carries. Moving on to new section E. Except as otherwise provided by this charter, all volunteer fire departments and rural fire districts located within the city county are hereby consolidated into and made part of the Butte-Silver Fire Department, excluding the areas within the towns of Walkerville and the Melrose Fire District. All powers, duties, and responsibilities previously vested by Montana law in boards of trustees or governing bodies of such volunteer or rural fire districts, excluding the areas within the town of Walkerville and the Melrose Fire District, shall be extinguished and now exercised by Butte-Silver County and the Butte-Silver County Council of Commissioners unless otherwise provided by this charter or ordinance. The administration, operational control, budgetary authority, and coordination of all fire services, including all volunteer and rural fire departments, shall be exercised through the Butte-Silver Bow. Excuse me, am I getting off here? Okay. Is that an E? Is that? That's F? Okay, because I thought that was the second paragraph where we were getting something that was goofy there. Okay, so let me start over. So E would be, except as otherwise provided by this charter, all volunteer fire departments, et cetera, ending with Butte-Silver Bow County and the Butte-Silver Bow County Council of Commissioners unless otherwise provided by this charter or ordinance. I think we duplicate that, do we not, Mr. And Ruth? We could end it at Commissioners because we say, and at the beginning, except as otherwise provided by this charter.
Yes, sorry, that is a duplicate.
Do we need or ordinance up above?
Yes, I would put or ordinance at the front. I just duplicated it at the end. So except as otherwise provided by this charter or ordinance.
Okay. All right, so let me begin again. So it would be subsection E, except as otherwise provided by this charter or ordinance, and then continuing on as read previously, all volunteer fire departments, et cetera.
Yes,
The change in the Melrose Fire District language,
correct.
and then we would end at shall be extinguished and now exercised by Butte-Silver Bow County and the Butte-Silver Bow County Council of Commissioners.
Correct, period. That is section G.
I think it's section E.
Or E, I'm sorry. I'm losing it too, guys, I'm sorry.
There's a lot of markup, so it's easy to lose it. Ms. Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At this moment, I would move to approve Section 7.03. This is sub E as amended.
Second.
I have a motion by Shaw and a second by Dennehy. Further discussion? Okay. Ms. Casey.
Aye.
Mr. Thielen. Mr. Dennehy.
Aye.
Mr. Silk.
Aye.
Ms. Shaw.
Aye.
Ms. McCormick. I also vote aye. Motion carries. Okay, then the next paragraph would be section F. The administration, operational control, budgetary authority, and coordination of all fire protection services, including all volunteer and rural fire departments, shall be exercised through the Butte-Silver Bow Fire Department under the authority of the Director of Fire Services, the Chief Executive or City Manager, and the Council of Commissioners. Continuing on, except as otherwise provided by this charter, the Director of Fire Services, the Chief Executive or City Manager, and the Council of Commissioners shall establish operational standards and training requirements, response protocols, and equipment policies applicable to all fire protection agencies operating within the city county to ensure consistent and effective public safety services. This includes the distribution, use, and transfer of fire protection equipment, apparatus, and facilities in order to promote efficient fire protection services. Mr. Thielen.
Didn't we have temporary in there before somewhere?
We were batting
For
that
the-
around.
For the
We-
transfer?
Yeah, we were batting that around. We never came to consensus. Ms. Casey asked us to move back and take these section by section. This is
Right.
where we stalled out.
Well, and it, yeah, so,
Mr. Silk?
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I make a motion, then we're still, we need a second to have discussion on it correctly. Is that the process you want to use?
Yep.
Okay, I make a motion. We approve subsection F as you just read it.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion from Silk and a second by Casey. In discussion. Mr. Silk?
Thank you, Madam Chair. County Attorney Enruth, were you indicating to stay away from the word temporary?
Commissioner Silk, or excuse me, Chairwoman Brandel, Commissioner Silk, it can be added in there. It doesn't affect anything. Again, Commissioner Brandel's comment, though, of the Director of Fire Services, Chief Executive / Mayor, or the Council of Commissioners can define, temporary, permanent, those types of things. So while the word temporary can go in there, they can also define what a temporary transfer is. If a temporary transfer is for 2 years or not for 2 years, or, where it gets transferred to and from, which is why I believe her suggestion was to leave it out, because they will be able to define what permanent is as well within the last section of the or charter that you're discussing.
Follow up, Madam Chair. Thank you. Thank you for that, County Attorney Enruth. I just keep going back to the ability for the local government to make the decisions, and regardless if it's in or out, it's still going to work for us. But I just wanted to ask that question. Thank you.
Ms. Casey?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would be in favor of not putting temporary in, because as County Attorney mentioned, temporary means a difference to different people. It could be a 30-day window, a 90-day window could be temporary. So I think it would be best left to be determined and defined in ordinance.
Ms. Shaw?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And now that I think this through a little bit more, I believe that County Attorney did say that when we go to H, and let's say we vote in that we cannot permanently reallocate, that kind of helps to solve the problem on both sides of the equation. So in that regard, I would not add that temporary in.
Mr. Dennehy? Or you just have your
I'm
microphone on?
just shaking my head.
Okay. All right, so we have the motion and the second. Is there any further discussion? Okay, so Ms. Casey, subsection F.
Aye.
Mr. Thielen? Mr. Dennehy?
Aye.
Mr. Silk?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw? Ms. McCormick? And I vote aye. Section F carries. All right, a new subsection G. There shall be a volunteer fire coordinator to serve as the representative of the volunteer fire departments and the liaison to the Director of Fire Services in advisory capacity. The volunteer fire coordinator shall be selected by the volunteer membership. Mr. Silk?
Madam Chair, at this time, I'd like to make a motion we approve subsection G as you just read.
Okay, I have a motion from Silk and a second from Thielen. Further discussion? I just noticed I tripped down in an advisory capacity when I was reading, but I think it will be okay. So, any further discussion? All right, subsection G, Ms. McCormick. Ms. Shaw. Mr. Silk.
Aye.
Mr. Dennehy.
Aye.
Mr. Thielen.
Aye.
Ms. Casey.
Aye.
I also vote aye. Motion carries. Okay, so it would be now re-lettered as section H. Mr. Enruth, why is there an H and then it's 1 and 2?
Because it was previously under G 1 and 2. So just the section number is changing. The only thing changing in H is adding the Melrose Fire District language.
Okay, so section H,
Subsection 1.
Subsection 1, the Council of Commissioners shall establish by ordinance a district for fire protection services excluding the area within the town of Walkerville and Melrose Fire District. Within this district, there shall be a uniform tax levy for fire protection services. Subsection 2 remained the same as previous charter, correct?
Correct.
Ms. Shaw?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would move to approve, this is, we're at 7.03, sub G and sub 1 and 2.
It's H, Ms. Shaw.
Oh, H. No, it's,
H.
isn't it, County Attorney Enruth, I'm sorry, that should be, 1 and 2 is under
H.
H, okay, excuse me, as corrected by County Attorney. I can repeat the motion if you want.
Okay, so I have a motion by Shaw
Yes. I move that. As-
Second.
and a second from Dennehy.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Ms. McCormick?
I just don't see why we need the 1 and 2. If you go back into, is it section F? You have 2 paragraphs that talk about the same things but in different ways, and they're not 1 and 2. I mean, I just don't think you need the 1 and 2s. They can just be standalone paragraphs. It just, I think you need to have something above it if you're going to divide it into 2, is what I guess I should say.
Madam Chair.
Ms. Casey?
Thank you. I would agree with Mary. I know this section hasn't changed, but nowhere else above have we done 1 or 2. So I think just to be consistent, if nothing else, that we should do away with the numbers 1 and 2 also.
I agree. I found those confusing, which was the nature of my question for why there's subsections. So do I have an amended motion?
Thank you, Chair. I'm just saying that that's why I said sub 1 and 2, because it should follow underneath something. But I will move again to approve section 7.03, and this is H, correct? Without, and leaving out the numbers according to our original plan, so, yeah.
Second.
I have a motion from Shaw, a second from Dennehy. Further discussion? All right, Ms. Casey.
Aye.
Mr. Thielen.
Aye.
Mr. Dennehy.
Aye.
Mr. Silk.
Aye.
Ms. Shaw. Ms. McCormick. I also vote aye. Motion carries. Moving on to re-lettered section I. I'm sensing we'd like to pull out the 1s and 2s. So first paragraph would read, any ordinance changing boundaries of the existing fire districts or permanently reallocating firefighting equipment shall require an affirmative vote by 2/3 of the whole number of council of commissioners. And then the second paragraph did not change from the existing charter language.
Madam Chair.
Ms. Casey?
Thank you. I would make a motion that we approve subsection I, as you have read with the changes.
I have a motion from Casey and a second from Thielen. Further discussion? I'll start with you, Ms. McCormick. Ms. Shaw? Mr. Silk?
Aye.
Mr. Dennehy?
Aye.
Mr. Thielen?
Aye.
Ms. Casey?
Aye.
And I also vote aye. Section passes. Thank you. All right, thanks for working through that, folks. We have, yeah, I feel like we need some applause. Thanks, Mr. Denny. So we have amended language for the charter for option 2. Mr. Enruth, can you clean up all the stuff, or you want me to do it?
I got it. I got pretty good notes.
Okay, and I also did it on the computer here, so I can send you anything that, I just wrote it as we were going along. So thank you, folks. We can get that into our report. That will move that piece along. With that, the final report is in OneDrive, and we've been updating in OneDrive. If you can't access that, I think we got a downloaded copy for you, right, Ms. Shaw? Anybody else need a downloaded copy? Mr. Thielen would as well. So please go look at those changes that we've made thus far and add any comments in there. I'd like to keep working this in the electronic fashion for now, since we've just got this section done. And then next week, I'd like to affirm it and get it out the door, which is a heavy lift for us, but I have confidence in us that we can get it done if we do our homework this week. Mr. Dennehy will do his right before he comes in, but just kidding.
Yeah. Okay, good enough. I'm married again, huh?
No, it's a running joke. We're always sitting in our chairs a little bit ahead reading.
Yes, I will be, yeah.
Okay. Any further discussion or things to note about the final report? And I think the working group will meet Friday as well to go through. Okay. I think that's what we talked about. Well, maybe we'll change our mind then. Yeah. With the certifications, Mr. Dennehy?
Madam Chair, thank you. Last week, the chair had given me the two ballots. I got 2 signatures tonight. I need Matt's signature to make that completed. I'm sorry, I forgot that I was out of town Wednesday. No, I'm sorry. Matt Steppen, I'm sorry.
I'm like, I'll sign right now.
So I hope Matt Steppen says the same thing. So I'll get Matt's signature on it. He's the only one that I haven't got. And I'll bring him up to the clerk and recorder for her submission to the Secretary of State.
Mr. Unruh, we did have a question as well, because the other certification is the things that were completed last study commission in section 11. I'm trying to find my reference here.
Oh, to determine all those things were done.
Yes.
Yes, I'm working on that.
Okay.
Yep.
Excellent.
Yep, I'll have that for next Monday. And that's what I was gonna say is you'll have it, but I won't be here.
Okay.
I'm gone on Monday.
Okay.
But yes, thank you for reminding me so I can get that email to you.
And then I believe all of our other certifications will be completed once we finish the report and we certify that as well, correct?
Yes, from what I've seen from Dan Clark, yeah.
Okay, so we're getting there, folks. So next week, we will affirm that final report, get it out the door, make sure all of our certifications are ready to go. And then we can have a discussion about recess for a bit until we come back to do the educational materials and workshopping those pieces. So any further questions or discussion about that? Okay. All right, I appreciate, go ahead, Mr. Enruth.
Chairman Brandel, can you remind me, what is our drop dead deadline for having the stuff to the Secretary of State to make the ballot?
July 7th.
It's the 7th, right? I was thinking the 15th, but I knew it was wrong, so it's July 7th. So we need to get that to step in, because we need to know if they're gonna allow our 3-part question, or if it's gonna revert back to the other.
Yeah. Our goal was to get it out on the 15th for that reason.
Yep.
All right. All right, so we will meet next week, and then hopefully we're going to be done for a while. Or we can stay working every Monday until November when our commission expires. So, all right, folks, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we adjourn, and hopefully we can finish this stuff next week and take a little bit of a break.
Thank you, Mr. Thielen. Is there a second? Ms. Shaw, thank you.
So I do. On it when I was a volunteer, and then they stopped calling volunteers because they weren't able to fulfill it. So in history. So we had talked about. So they recently, they just did it. Oh, yeah, like 6 years ago or something. Just missing. That's good. Don't know where it's at.
Yeah, I'm like, I have picking a 5 with